"Had I but followed your advice, beautiful Persian," he said, "all this would not have happened. But at least I have this consolation, that I have spent my fortune in the company of friends who will not desert me in an hour of need. Tomorrow I will go to them, and amongst them they will lend me a sum sufficient to start in some business." Accordingly, next morning, early Noureddin went to seek his 10 friends, who all lived in the same street. Knocking at the door of the first and chief, the slave who opened it left him to wait in a hall while he announced his visit to his master. "Noureddin," he heard him exclaim quite audibly, "tell him, every time he calls, that I am not at home." The same thing happened at the second door, and also at the third, and so on with all the 10. Noureddin, much mortified, recognized too late that he had confided in false friends, who abandoned him in his hour of need. Overwhelmed with grief, he sought consolation from the beautiful Persian. "Alas, my lord," she said, "at last you are convinced of the truth of what I foretold. There is now no other resource left but to sell your slaves and your furniture." First, then he sold the slaves, and subsisted for a time on the proceeds. After that the furniture was sold, and as much of it was valuable it sufficed for some time. Finally, this resource also came to an end, and again he sought counsel from the beautiful Persian. "My lord," she said, "I know that the late vizier, your father, bought me for 10,000 gold pieces, and though I have diminished in value since, I should still fetch a large sum. Do not therefore hesitate to sell me, and with the money you obtain, go and establish yourself in business in some distant town." "Charming Persian," answered Noureddin, "how could I be guilty of such baseness? I would die rather than part from you, whom I love better than my life." "My lord," she replied, "I am well aware of your love for me, which is only equaled by mine for you, but a cruel necessity obliges us to seek the only remedy." Noureddin, convinced at length of the truth of her words, yielded, and reluctantly led her to the slave market, where, showing her to a dealer named Hagi Hassan, he inquired her value. Taking them into a room apart, Hagi Hassan exclaimed as soon as she had unveiled, "My lord, is not this the slave your father bought for 10,000 pieces?" On learning that it was so, he promised to obtain the highest possible price for her. Leaving the beautiful Persian shut up in the room alone, he went on to seek the slave merchants, announcing to them that he had found the pearl among slaves, and asking them to come and put a value upon her. As soon as they saw her, they agreed that less than 4,000 gold pieces could not be asked. Hagi Hassan, then closing the door upon her, began to offer her for sale, calling out, "Who will bid 4,000 gold pieces for the Persian slave?" Before any of the merchants had bid, Sawi happened to pass that way, and judging that it must be a slave of extraordinary beauty, rode up to Hagi Hassan and desired to see her. Now it was not the custom to show a slave to a private bidder, but as no one dared to disobey the vizier, his request was granted. As soon as Sawi saw the Persian, he was so struck by her beauty that he immediately wished to possess her, and not knowing that she belonged to Noureddin, he desired Hagi Hassan to send for the owner and to conclude the bargain at once. Hagi Hassan then sought Noureddin and told him that his slave was going far below her value, and that if Sawi bought her, he was capable of not paying the money. "What you must do," he said, "is to pretend that you had no real intention of selling your slave, and only swore you would in a fit of anger against her. When I present her to Sawi, as if with your consent, you must step in, and with blows begin to lead her away." Noureddin did as Hagi Hassan advised, to the great wrath of Sawi, who, riding straight at him, endeavored to take the beautiful Persian from him by force. Noureddin, letting her go, seized Saoui's horse by the bridle, and, encouraged by the applause of the bystanders, dragged him to the ground, beat him severely, and left him in the gutter, streaming with blood. Then, taking the beautiful Persian, he returned home amidst the acclamations of the people, who detested Saoui so much that they would neither interfere in his behalf nor allow his slaves to protect him. Covered from head to foot with mire and streaming with blood, he rose, and leaning on 2 of his slaves, went straight to the palace, where he demanded an audience of the king, to whom he related what had taken place in these words: "May it please your majesty, I had gone to the slave market to buy myself a cook. While there, I heard a slave being offered for 4,000 pieces. Asking to see her, I found she was of incomparable beauty and was being sold by Noureddin, the son of your late vizier, to whom your majesty will remember giving a sum of 10,000 gold pieces for the purchase of a slave. This is the identical slave, whom instead of bringing to your majesty, he gave to his own son. Since the death of his father, this Noureddin has run through his entire fortune, has sold all his possessions, and is now reduced to selling the slave. Calling him to me, I said, 'Noureddin, I will give you 10,000 gold pieces for your slave, whom I will present to the king. I will interest him at the same time in your behalf, and this will be worth much more to you than what extra money you might obtain from the merchants.' 'Bad old man,' he exclaimed, 'rather than sell my slave to you, I would give her to a Jew.' 'But Noureddin,' I remonstrated, 'you do not consider that in speaking thus you wrong the king, to whom your father owed everything.' This remonstrance only irritated him the more. Throwing himself on me like a madman, he tore me from my horse, beat me to his heart's content, and left me in the state your majesty sees." So saying, Saoui turned aside his head and wept bitterly. The king's wrath was kindled against Noureddin. He ordered the captain of the guard to take with him 40 men, to pillage Noureddin's house, to raze it to the ground, and to bring Noureddin and the slave to him. A doorkeeper named Sangiar, who had been a slave of Khacan's, hearing this order given, slipped out of the king's apartment and hastened to warn Noureddin to take flight instantly with the beautiful Persian. Then, presenting him with 40 gold pieces, he disappeared before Noureddin had time to thank him. As soon, then, as the fair Persian had put on her veil, they fled together, and had the good fortune to get out of the town without being observed. At the mouth of the Euphrates, they found a ship just about to start for Baghdad. They embarked, and immediately the anchor was raised and they set sail. When the captain of the guard reached Noureddin's house, he caused his soldiers to burst open the door and to enter by force, but no trace was to be found of Noureddin and his slave, nor could the neighbors give any information about them. When the king heard that they had escaped, he issued a proclamation that a reward of 1,000 gold pieces would be given to whoever would bring him Noureddin and the slave, but that, on the contrary, whoever hid them would be severely punished. Meanwhile, Noureddin and the fair Persian had safely reached Baghdad. When the vessel had come to an anchor, they paid 5 gold pieces for their passage and went ashore. Never having been in Baghdad before, they did not know where to seek a lodging. Wandering along the banks of the Tigris, they skirted a garden enclosed by a high wall.